Hello there, and welcome to So Far So Good Sewing Club, to video tutorial on how to make a very easy headband with buttons, which is becoming one of those most wanted items for our frontline medical professionals to prevent the wear and tear that they get from the face mat. This is the headband I was talking about. This is the headband we're going to be making today. As you see, it has a white part at the top and it has a mirror part at the bottom with nice little tabs over here and the buttons. And this is what it would look like if you would be wearing a mask. As I mentioned before, the elastic will go behind those buttons, relieving all the pressure away from the ears. This band that we're going to be making today, headband, is very, very easy to make. And it requires a minimum amount of stitching. So for anybody who's a beginner to sewing and starting to learn how to sew, this is an awesome project for you. Also, the best part about it is that it's an upcycling project, which we are extremely passionate about here at So Far So Good Sewing Club. It's taking some old item that's been sort of unwanted, and turning it into something that's desirable and new and exciting. In today's tutorial, I'm going to be showing you how to use this t-shirt and make it into actually a few headbands. If you see over here, we can do. So just something to keep in mind is that some t-shirts will have seams on the side and usually they get twisted, and some t-shirts don't have seam on the side. It's more of a tubular style, but not to worry, we'll just pretend like those seams are not even here. To complete this project, we are going to use either a rotary cutter, that's to make sure that you have a self-healing mat as well, which is important, or just the basic fabric scissors to cut, chalk, pins, you know, the regular stuff that we would need, a ruler, and maybe tape measurement. That would be good. Obviously, to finish off our band, we're gonna need a sewing machine, some buttons, and a sewing needle. We're going to start by laying out our t-shirt nice and flat on the table. In my case, which is a good example, the seam that I have over here on the side seam kind of got twisted, which we're just going to ignore, okay? The most important thing is to lay your t-shirt nice and flat. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to split this t-shirt on the side seam. I'm gonna go all the way to the armhole. Okay, so there. Now it's sort of becoming more like one. And now what we're going to do is we will make a very large rectangle. The first thing, I want you to draw a line at the hem, trying to make sure it's nice and straight all the way. We are going to measure 5 inches from that line in a few points, and we are going to draw a parallel line to the bottom. As I said, 5 inches up from the bottom. The length of the band that we're going to need needs to be 20 inches. Well, let's say 20 and a half, depending how stretchy the fabric is sometimes. But on average, it's anywhere from 20 to 20 and a half. Okay? And so now what I'm going to do, I'm going to cut on those two lines. So as you see now, we got a nice long strip if I open it, right? So, but what I want to do is As you see, this one is a bit on the angle. I want to draw a nice perpendicular line to the bottom and the top to avoid this curve, this angle over here. So I'll draw the line and I'll cut it off. Now, the some t-shirts that you're going to get can fit all 20 inches in one length, and some you're gonna need to have a little bit more than just a half a t-shirt. In this case, it looks like we're gonna need a little bit more. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to open this up like this. Let's see, like that. And I'm going to measure 20.5 inches. 21. I'm gonna go with 21. And again, I'm going to measure it off at the top and at the bottom. And let's see if I do halfway. No, it's gonna be too short. Okay, so, and then I'm going to connect these two lines. And I'm going to cut it. So this is now what I have here is a rectangle that's about 20 inches and a half in length and 5 inches in width. The next thing I'm going to do, I'm going to put this aside and I'm going to take this piece now. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to cut a strip that we're going to use for the tabs. In this case, I find that just 2 inches strip is perfect. This ruler is fantastic for this. I'm just going to, because it's exactly 2 inches wide, it's going to be 2 inches by 10 inches. So each strip is going to need to be 5 inches long. So you can even mark 5 inches here and 10 inches there. And sometimes what I do, I just fold it up, align this cut off edge, and I mark this right at the mark, and I just cut it this way. And then we're just gonna cut this off. And again, split it halfway. You can either mark 5 inches or just fold it in two. It's a small piece, so you can just do this and cut it halfway. So now what we're going to have is our long strip, 5 inches by 20 and a half, and we're going to have two strips of 2 inches by 5 inches. Once we have everything cut up, we are going to start with our larger rectangle. You're going to place it in front of you on a table, making sure that the right side is facing up and the wrong side is facing down. In some cases, if you have a print and if you cut up some side seams when you were cutting a t-shirt, the seams should be facing down, obviously, and the print should be facing up. Next step is to fold our rectangle in a half and align our cut edges. Pin them so they don't slip when we're stitching, and run a seam of 1/2 inch seam allowance, reinforcing the top and the bottom. What's important to note is that we are working with a stretchy fabric, and this is why you have to make sure that your machine is set up at either zigzag or stretch seam. This will prevent any of the seams breaking after we're done with this project and the headband is being worn. Okay, so now as you can see, I stitched this at 1/2 inch seam allowance. This is better to see because it's a different color stitching. Okay, so now what we're going to do, we're going to open this up like this. Open the seam up. You can iron it, or you can just sort of iron it with your hands and kind of center it as much as possible. Okay, and what I want you to do is I want you to make a mark 2.5 inches from the seam one way and 2.5 inches from the seam the other way. So I'm going to measure this amount, and I'm just going to chalk this, and then that would be 5 inches. So I'm going to chalk it right here. Now what I'm going to do, I'm going to put this facing the bottom. Okay, so that's where my seam is, like this. And the next thing what I'm going to do is, you have to be watching this carefully. So I'm going to fold this part here, the top layer, and the top part of the top layer in. This is what I have right now. Okay, and now is I'm going to take the bottom layer and the top layer, and I'm going to join them right at the seam that we just made. And I'm going to pin it at the seam here, and I'm going to pin at the mark that we did. Remember that marking that we did? So I'm going to do it like here, and then I'm going to do it right here. And what you're going to do next is you're going to run a seam of, again, 1/2 inch seam allowance. This is really important to make sure that this seam you do either on zigzag or stretch stitch. So you go from this marking with the reinforcement all the way to this marking with the reinforcement. So as you've seen, I stitched the seam right here. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to start pulling this out, and it's like it's like you're pulling something out of the bag. What that's going to do is that's going to turn our seam inside out like this. There, see? So what you get a band now with a wider part over here and stitch part over there. This is what's going to look like this. So what I'm going to do is I want to make sure that this seam kind of falls in the center of the band, okay, to keep it in there. So this is the band itself now. Now the next thing I want to do is we will put our little tabs on both sides. And for that, if you pay attention, if you're using a cotton t-shirt, has a bit of Lycra, it's jersey, so it usually rolls, as you see. As soon as I'm going to start pulling it, it's going to start rolling on the side. So you want this side that's, you know, more rounded to be your right side, and the ones that curls on these sides, the inside of that wants to be on the inside. So now I'm going to put my band like this, the portion where I stitched, and I'm going to put it with the right side against the band, right? So the fabric curls on the outside like this. I'm just going to sandwich my band on inside, and I'm going to take this strip, I'm going to align those two edges, and I'm going to pin it here. You can do 2 pins, you can do 1 pin, doesn't really matter. And then I'm going to do the same thing with the other strip. So it curls on inside. I want the curl edges on the outside. So I'm going to also wrap it around the band, and I'm going to join those two edges like this, nicely aligned, and I'm going to pin it and stitch that at 1/2 inch. So I'm going to stitch it right here, 1/2 inch seam allowance, and right there. So as you've seen, I stitched already these guys, and now what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of open this seam with my fingers like this, and I'm going to fold this inwards so the seams meet over here. So basically I'm just folding the strip in two, so it becomes half of the measurement that we cut it, so it's about 1 inch. And I'm going to do the same thing on this side. I'm going to fold this in. Hold on. I'm going to fold this in. So basically I'm folding this band in. What you can do is to make sure that the fold line is probably the nice fold line, clean line facing the front, and the cut up edge facing the back. Stubborn a bit. And the same thing on this side. So I'm gonna face it like this. Now, this is the seam that we've done. There's another seam, that's original seam of t-shirt. So what's important is to align this band with the part where the stitching stops on the inside of the seam, okay? So I'm gonna align my band here, and I'm gonna do the same thing on this side. I'm gonna turn the seam, and this is where we stop stitching. So I'm going to align this guy as well over here and align the seam. So this is what's gonna look like on the right on the other side, and this is what's gonna look like on this side. And now the only other thing we have to do is we have to sew on the buttons. So the button can go one right here and the other one right here. So the basics of sewing a button, it's not just sewing it so it's flat. You have to, after attaching it after a few stitches, you have to make sure that you create a little neck for the button. And I'm going to show you how to do that. So now we're going to sew the button on. Some of you already probably know this is the basics of sewing, but there's a little trick in how to do the neck of the button. Now, to avoid and speed up the process of stitching on the button, what I usually do is I take double the length of the thread, okay? I double it. And when I thread my needle, I use the double thread. Usually when you have a big hole or eye, as you want to call it, on the top of the needle, it's a bit easier. So I'm going to thread it. What that means is that when I'm stitching through my button, at one stitch, doing one stitch, I already have 4 threads going through. So that speeds up the process quite a bit. Pause it. So you're going to start by stitching this button on. It's a bit thick. There's so many layers of fabric. You can do a crisscross, or you can do, just pick your own style of the button that you wanna, not style of the button, the style of the stitching you wanna do. So by doing, as I said to you before, I just did once and I already have 4 layers of thread going through. So in this case, I'm just going to make 2 stitches through each hole. And also what's important to note is that don't make it too tight already, okay? Make it a bit loose. And some people, what they do, they actually put a toothpick between these layers. Toothpick when they stitch, so it's easier. But in this case, I just made it a bit loose. Now, what we're going to do, we're going to create the neck for this button. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to move my button a bit away. I'm going to go in the back, and I want to come out right next to the stitching. Okay, so I'm going to come out here. It's quite thick. And now I'm going to take this thread and I will loop it around, just tie it around like this a couple of times. That creates a bit of a neck. Okay, and then what you will do is to reinforce, and the button is done. And here you have it, a very easy, very simple, very comfortable headband with the buttons in the back to relieve the pressure from elastic wearing behind the ears. We are really, as I mentioned before, passionate about upcycling. and in today's world it's really much needed. So anybody has a t-shirt at home, it's the best way to use it. I hope you enjoyed our video tutorial. If you have any comments, please comment below. Meantime, if you like our video tutorials, please subscribe for some more. Thank you and see you soon.